أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome everybody to today's class. Jazakumullah for arriving early. Let's start the class straight away with our prayer. And if I call a student to the mic, 3120. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, darling. Okay. If you can please recite Dawood, that's on the screen in front of you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. I seek refuge with Allah from Shaitan the rejecting.
MashaAllah. And the Tasmiyah.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Gracious, the Merciful.
Very, very nice. Jazakumullah. Let's move on to the prayer. It's Monday today, a very rainy Monday. Okay, Sihat. So the prayer's on the screen. Would you be able to recite that by yourself?
No.
Okay, not to worry. Let me recite it first. You follow along. And a reminder to everybody that we expect you all to be reciting out loud, even though you're not on the mic. Okay? Okay then. So how we're going to start. Let me get my highlighter from here. Okay? Rabbish rahli sadri.
Rabbish ahli sadri.
Okay, so that was very, very nice, Suha. But just here, this letter, whoops, daisy. Okay, let me just see here, there's a ra here, okay? So when we read this, we go to say Rabbish rahli, okay? Rabbish rahli sadri.
Rabbish rahli sadri.
Well done. Wayassir li amri.
Wayassir li amri.
MashaAllah. And the translation is well, darling.
Lord, expand my mind and make my task easy for me.
And the reference?
Taha 26 to 27.
Yes. And you know what Taha is?
It's Surah.
It is indeed from the Holy Quran. Okay, well done. And 26 to 27 is the verses in which you'll find this prayer. Okay, Jazakallah, lovely start to the class. Allah Hafiz for now, darling. Okay, so today we have a presentation because we're going to be starting a new topic today. And we're going to introduce you to the topic of Waqf. And Waqf is an Arabic word which means to pause. So we're just going to introduce you to the topic so you have an understanding as to why we have to have pausing and introduce you to what you're going to be learning over the next 2 weeks. Okay, and then we will go into our breakout rooms and there with your teachers, you will practice from Surah Al-Ma'idah, verses 51 to 54. And then if you then come back to the main class and the main teacher will then assign you your homework and conclude the class. Okay, so let's now go to our presentation, which is here. Okay, Waqf, pausing. Waqf is the Arabic, pausing is the English translation. When we recite the Holy Quran, we run out of breath and we then need to take a pause and take a breath and then start again. And today's lesson explains the correct ways to do this. There are two things that we need to be aware of when we're reciting. The first thing is that when we've run out of breath, we should pause to take that breath, but we should pause somewhere such that the meaning of what we're reading is not changed. Now, let's just go and look at an example to see how meaning can be changed depending on where we pause. And because we speak English here in the UK, I'm going to give you an example in English because that will mean a little bit more to you. So let's talk about a young boy named Zishan. And Zishan, he's a really sociable boy and he loves his family. He enjoys eating with others, especially burgers and fries and all the fun things that young people do like. He especially likes barbecues because he gets to cook at the barbecue. It makes him feel really grown up. And he particularly likes it when his whole family get together for a barbecue, from his grandmother to his aunts and uncles, and all of his cousins. And he absolutely loves it if he's also allowed to invite his friends over. So he's a very sociable boy. Okay, so you've just got an understanding now of what Zishan is all about. Okay, and you haven't met him, but that's what he's all about. So now let's summarize what we've just learned about him. And let's just write down the key points of what we just learned. Zishan likes barbecuing and eating his friends and his family. Now, the way that I've just read that, Zishan likes barbecuing and eating his friends and his family all in one go, sounds like Zishan likes to take his friends and his family, put them in a marinade, stick them on the barbecue, give them a good grilling, and then eat them up afterwards, maybe with some ketchup and some mayonnaise. And that's actually not what we've just understood about Zishan. That's not what he's all about. Alhamdulillah. So let's read that again using the same words, but we'll take a pause. Zishan likes barbecuing and eating his friends and his family. So that's not really that much better. We get an understanding that Zishan likes to barbecue, but he also likes to eat his friends and his family, which actually is, again, not what he's all about. Alhamdulillah. So let's use exactly the same words, and pause in different places. Zishan likes barbecuing and eating his friends and his family. And that is more what we've just learned about Zishan. And if you can see, exactly the same words have been said there in all three boxes, but because of the way I paused in between, the meaning changed. When we read, where we pause, where we stop, can make a difference. It can change the meaning. So let's relate that to reciting the Holy Quran. The Holy Quran contains the words of Allah. And so we definitely do not want to change the meaning of what is being said. And that's guidance for us as to how we're supposed to live our lives to be happy and successful young individuals, to have a productive life. So we definitely don't want to change the meaning of what is being said. Now, many of us from a young age will learn some of the short surahs, An-Nas, Al-Falaq, Ikhlas, Al-Fatiha. And because we hear them so often, we sort of just know where we're supposed to stop and how we're supposed to start again. No one needs to tell us why or how, we just learn by hearing. But as we recite through the Holy Quran, as we journey our way through all the lovely teachings, we are reading Arabic, and most of us don't understand the Arabic that we're reading. We have to have a translation and a commentary in order to understand. So if we don't understand the actual language that we're reciting, how will we know where to pause? How will we know where to stop anywhere else other than the few small chapters that we might already know? So some ways that you can decide how to stop. And the first is, you can stop at the end of every verse. It is sunnah. Sunnah just means the ways of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It means what he would have done, and so it's his practice. Here, in the blue highlight just there, is a verse end. In this particular font, the verse ends are in square boxes and they've got Arabic numbers inside. Here is another end of a verse, and here is another end of a verse. So as we're reciting, we can choose to pause there, and that is actually an excellent practice. it's the example of the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. So we should pause there. So that's one way where we know where we can stop, and we won't change the meaning. Another way would be to use the pause marks within verses. So let's have a look at what we mean by the pause marks within verses. Here, you can see a little tiny gene written there. That's a pause mark. Here is another little gene. Here is another pause mark, a ta, the perfect stop. Here is another pause mark. As you recite, you will see these little pause marks. Now on NL1, you don't need to know the actual specific meaning of these pause marks because they all have a different rule that's applied to them. That's something you learn in a later course, inshallah. But for NL1, a general rule of thumb would be that if you ever see a meme as a pause mark, always stop there. You absolutely must stop there. And if you see a lam alif as a pause mark, don't stop there. General rule of thumb, okay, general rule of thumb, always stop, is compulsory to stop at a meme pause mark, and always read through a lam alif pause mark. Every other stop you sort of can pause at, okay? Oh, okay, and there was another pause mark there. Okay, a third way. If you're reciting and you have a long verse or you have longer portions within verses, you can stop and go back a few words and restart. So let's just have a look at what I mean by that. Okay, so here, okay, we have got some text here, and let's say I'm going to start here, okay, where the green arrow is pointing. So I'm just going to recite, let's see where I get to and when I have to pause to take a breath, okay? So just follow me from the fa. فَبِمَا نَقْضِهِمْ مِيثَاقَهُمْ لَعَنَّاهُمْ. So I've paused there, okay? I've run out of breath and I've paused there. So what am I going to do? How can I restart? So I'm going to use that rule, that guidance where you can go back and restart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to restart from there, okay? So follow with me until I pause again from the lam. لَعَنَّاهُمْ وَجَعَلْنَا قُلُوبَهُمْ قَاسِيَةً. And I paused there, which was an appropriate place to pause because that's a pause mark. Okay, so that's an example of how you can pause within a verse and then go back and then recite again. Here's another example. So I'm going to recite from here, okay, and let's see where I can reach as I'm reciting, okay? So just follow with me from this wow. وَمِنَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّا نَصَارَى أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَهُمْ. So I've run out of breath there and I've paused there, okay? So I'm going to take a breath and I've got to go back a few words and apply that sort of guidance and read again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to there and I'm going to read from here, okay? So if I read from there, أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَهُمْ فَنَسُوا حَظًّا مِّمَّا ذُكِّرُوا بِهِ. And I paused there. There was a pause mark there, so that was an appropriate place for me to pause. Okay, so that's an example of how we can pause, take a breath, but in order not to change the meaning, we can go back and recite from a few words before, okay? Now, this is just a general background information for you to understand why it's important to pause properly. So we've now just gone through that we should pause somewhere such that the meaning is not changed. And I hope that you've understood from the example that I've given why we need to make sure that we don't change the meaning. Let's look at the other thing that we need to be aware of. We should observe the rules of pausing, of waqf, whenever we pause. So, what do we mean by that, the rules of pausing? And the best way is to actually give you an example that you'll all understand. So let's look at the tasmiyah, okay, which that lovely student recited so beautifully at the beginning of the class. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Notice I said him. When we stop at the end of tasmiyah, we don't observe the kasra on the meme. There is a kasra there, but unless we're going to carry on reading, we don't say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We don't read the meme. If we're going to pause there, we say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. There is a kasra there, but we don't observe it. And that's because there's a rule that applies when you pause on a letter that carries a kasra. Okay, so there is a rule. There are lots of rules of pausing, rules of waqf. When you pause, you won't always read as it's written, what you're observing, what you're seeing with your eyes. You will have to apply the appropriate rule. And in NL1, you will learn some of the rules for our level. And we're going to use the Talimul-Qur'an lesson number 21, page number 85. And we'll start those rules from tomorrow. But I hope today that what you've done is understood why those rules are so important. Jazakumullah, Allah Hafiz.